Everyone, welcome to the next episode of Partnerships SaaS. I'm your host, Barrett King, and I think we're going to have a really good time today. I've got two big personalities with me, Asher and Kelly. If you don't know who they are, you're asleep. You're not on the internet. You're not on LinkedIn, certainly. These are two of the most influential, interesting, and frankly, I think entertaining individuals that I've had the chance of hanging out with. So, folks, welcome to the show.
That's a high bar, Barrett.
It's a high bar.
You better deliver some good insights here.
I'm just trying to figure out where do I size myself next to you, So like, is it the height? Is it the quality? Is the entertainment value? Like, what is it, Now I'm confused. So I'm going to go sleep for a little bit and come back.
I like that. I think you can compare on like a combination of LinkedIn network, how many times you post, and something about the color of your background. I know that that's something relevant to folks that you can actually see this. Asher has the coolest colors in his background. Kelly has this like super artistic background. So they're competing in that sense as well. I ask every guest this.
Kelly, I just go red. So I don't have to say
go red. I love it.
So she just I just want to see if she picks this up,
It's great. I love it. Hey, look, so I ask every guest this. It's super important. It's a baseline for how we kick off every episode. I want to know what partnerships means to you. And so let's start off with Kelly because Asher, you went first. Kelly, what does partnerships mean to you?
I think partnerships means organizations who form a mutually beneficial business relationship.
I like that. So people working better together, they're winning together. We'll talk about trust, that famous word that we were laughing at before we hit record afterwards. Asher, what does partnerships... Yeah, it does. It is important. What does partnerships mean to you, Asher?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Because Kelly and I spent a bunch of time just defining partnerships because we had to write, or I would say Kelly had to write 94 pages of this like amazing report. So
to write, loves to write.
Yes, exactly.
That's brilliant.
So I'm on the same page. The only thing I'll say is like, there's a big difference between a partner and a sponsor. And if you're in a partnership and one party is paying money to another party, that is not a partnership, that's a sponsorship. And so, as I was rightly blamed for posting a lot on LinkedIn, I did do a post on this topic, which went viral. But for me, at least, a partnership is what Kelly said. And if there's money exchanged by one party, it's a sponsorship.
That's interesting. I almost want to double click on that. So you're saying, do you see a lot of that then? Like, are you seeing folks in the market be one-sided quite a bit? I think I am. I mean, I'm kind of narrow in that sense, but I'm curious your perspective from both of you.
I see people use the word sponsor, just like you see salesperson say they're looking for a partnership when they're looking to sell you something. And the reason they do that, right, is they're basically trying to borrow the goodwill of the word partnership, which is a different relationship. Now, a sponsor is someone who's paying to get in front of an audience that's been built up in any which way. And if you switch it as a partnership, it can be misleading to the audience, right? Because they think there's a deeper and different relationship instead of someone paying just to get views. So I think that's why we see people doing it, is to try to leverage that value. But of course, that puts a burden on partnership people who are out there saying, hey, I want to form a partnership, and someone who's been hit up all day by salespeople saying, hey, I've got a great partnership conversation for you. But having said that, another company can be a customer, a partner, and a sponsor. So that's where it does legitimately get a little bit tricky.
It's the power of a word. Asher, what do you think about it?
I'll take the salesperson's approach here, right? Or perspective here. So if you are a go-to-market executive, right, and you have access to win-loss analysis, right, or you have a kick-ass product marketing team, have them ask the question in your close-loss analysis for the next 2 quarters and say, if we use the word partner, does that increase our ability to close the deal, or does it lag the deal? Because now we have confused the customer or prospect of what relationship we really want with them, right? And the results, I bet you, will come back and say that when the word partner was used in a sales process, it actually delayed the sale versus actually put the customer in a buying mode. And I've done this now twice at 2 different gigs. And it's been the same thing. And even though both gigs were at least 5 or 7 years apart, so it hasn't changed. And so I'm a big fan of just be very clear, specific about what the nature of your relationship is. And it's okay. Everybody's an adult now. People know they have to buy software. People know they have to buy services. So just call it what it is. and then let's move to the next process of like solving problems.
That's interesting. Think about like the power of a word and how impactful, or obviously as a detractor it could be to a process. But now you get me thinking about using one of the countless tools that are out there recording all of our calls these days, and trying to pull that word out and highlight how often you saying partner, how often you talking about that as a dynamic in a sales process, in a service, scenario, whatnot. It'd be really interesting to do that study. Is that our next study we're going to run? You guys going to like spend a couple hours or a month or a year or whatever?
That.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, listen.
It will be half a paragraph long.
Yeah. Exactly.
With Gong, get them involved.
There you go. Yeah, pull how many times partnership shows up in a close won versus close lost, and or like length of deal cycle. That could be interesting.
Hey,
so
we have two sponsors. One will be Gong, and the other one will be Zoom Info. So I think it'll be great.
You got your sponsors nailed. Perfect. So Kelly signed up for that. Is that what I'm hearing you say? You're like good to go on a 20-page report around the word partnerships being used too much? No,
I'll write that report.
Well, you know what it is? Because what's interesting about it is it is a word. I even like, and I'm, we call it years ago, but back when I was a sales rep, there was a common language of saying partnership. There was always, let's build our partnership together. And it never actually nailed down the ideology of what obviously we all are invested in, which is like mutually beneficial relationships and shared value and better together stories, and the things that actually make it worthwhile spending time with another business versus what we're talking about, which is kind of the opposite. And so now I'm curious, like, where do you think that comes from? Do you think that the use of those terms, the kind of free nature of it, is just because people are not thinking about what they're saying? Or do you think because partnerships is indicative of a togetherness? Like you want to feel aligned. You want to feel like you're working with your kind of a sales opponent in that example, or services opponent.
I think that's part of it. I think the legitimate part too, when you get into more strategic sales, is you can have partnerships layered on top of strategic customer accounts. So I think that's part of where the overlap legitimately comes from. But then I do think, sales has moved to this consultative process where we often think of ourselves as salespeople, not as trying to close the deal, but rather help the prospect. That's the theory, right? And I think that mode of selling and that framework of selling fits in much more naturally with the idea that that person is your partner rather than someone you're like hunting down to get the deal closed. Yeah. So there isn't a legitimate affinity there, but as you know, words matter. And I think partnerships field in general has a huge language problem right now. Like, what's an ecosystem and what does that mean? It depends on who you're talking to. So I think it's really interesting and important to dive into these different terms and who's using them where, to understand if we're talking past each other or saying the same thing.
Yeah, I would just say the act of partnering or the willingness to partner is different than building a partnership, right? Because you can't say like, hey, I want to build a partnership, but can you pay me $1 million, by the way? It just doesn't, I don't know. I just don't think it fits well, right? But if you say,
wait a second, what do you mean by that? Because a lot of partnerships are monetized.
In a sales process, right? I'm like, hey, I'm going to go sell you something, right? I want you to give me $1 million, but I'm building a partnership, right?
Well, versus saying, that's hey, the extent of it.
I want to partner with you. Can we treat each other as equals? If not, can we just get to that point and then move through the process of, understanding pain and figuring out what outcomes look like and what is the time it's going to take for my software or services to help you get to that outcome.
It's interesting. Kelly, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way he's framing it, because when you think about partnerships at scale, right, you often don't have that conversation. And Barrett, I assume from your day job, you also think about this, and I know I think about this on my side, is partnerships at scale are usually very low touch, if not no touch. So you're not really having those type of conversations in a one-on-one in the way you would with a more managed or strategic partner. So I think given some of those relationships are monetized, it does take on a closer feel to a sales cycle and a sales process, and is looked at in a potentially more mercenary way. But that ties into trust that we were talking about right before the call, is how do you establish trust at scale, and how do you infuse that into the scaled partnerships? Because that is something that can make it feel different than just a sales process.